Have you ever been in a relationship thinking, is this person a narcissist or just emotionally unavailable? Because on the surface, sometimes the behaviors can look the same. The distance, the hot and cold, that feeling of never being met, no matter how much effort you put in. You are there, you're trying, you're opening your heart, and yet something always feels off. Like you are reaching for connection, but never quite being emotionally received. Over time, you start questioning yourself. Am I asking for too much? Am I being too sensitive? Why does this feel so lonely, even though I'm not alone? And in the world where everyone is being labeled a narcissist, we're collapsing very different emotional patterns into one word that feels easier than understanding. So today, I want to talk about the real differences between someone who shows narcissistic patterns and someone who has avoidant attachment style. And more importantly, what actually matters for your healing. Because the real danger isn't the label, it's what happens to you in the relationship. How much you start shrinking, how much you start doubting yourself, how much of yourself you slowly abandon just to keep connection going. Hi there, welcome to Love with Eve. I'm Eve Kyle, relationship coach and women's empowerment coach. I help women rebuild their love life without repeating their past. Today, I'll walk you through the key differences between avoidant partner and a narcissistic partner, and what you can do to protect your emotional well-being. First, let's talk about why a narcissistic partner and avoidant partner can look the same. They both might disappear emotionally, pull away right after intimacy, struggle with vulnerability, and shut down when you need closeness, and leave you feeling confused, rejected, and constantly questioning yourself. So from the outside, and especially from the inside relationship, it's always easy to conclude, if they hurt me, they must be toxic. If they withdrew, they must be manipulative. And if I feel abandoned, they must be doing this on purpose. But here's the truth. Similar behaviors do not mean similar psychology. Two people can do exactly the same thing from completely different internal reasons. Let me give you an example. Imagine two partners who both suddenly stop texting after a deep emotional conversation. From your perspective, it feels the same. Silence, distance, that familiar sinking feeling in your chest. But internally, one person might be thinking, I need to regain control. I shared too much. That makes me feel weak. And the other might be thinking, this feels overwhelming. My body's flooded. I don't know how to stay connected and safe at the same time. Same behavior, totally different inner voices. One comes from ego and identity regulation. The other comes from nervous system and emotional safety regulation. And this distinction is everything, because a narcissistic partner usually pulls away to protect their self-image, to maintain power, to avoid feeling exposed, inferior, or unimportant. Whereas avoidant partner pulls away to protect their nervous system, to reduce emotional overwhelm, to regulate anxiety they often don't have language for. One is saying, I must stay superior, and the other saying, I must stay safe. But from the receiving side, it feels exactly the same, cold, disconnected, unreachable, which is why so many people get stuck in the question, is this person avoidant or are they a narcissist? And the deeper question underneath that is this person incapable of loving me or just afraid of closeness? This is where most people start self-diagnosing their partner, labeling, pathologizing, and Googling late at night. But what we are really trying to understand is this. Why does it hurt so much? And what is actually happening here? Because behavior alone is not enough to diagnose intention. You have to understand the driver behind the behavior. And here's a core reframe. Narcissism is an ego regulation problem. Avoidance is a nervous system regulation problem. Same withdrawal, same silence, same emotional distance, but one is driven by identity. The other one is driven by survival. And until you see that difference, you keep personalizing what was never about you. You keep trying to fix something that wasn't yours to fix. And you keep questioning your worth when the real issue was never your value. It was their internal capacity for connection. Now let's talk about what's really driving them. Let's start with narcissistic patterns. Narcissistic behavior is usually rooted in fragile self-worth. Under the confidence, there's often deep insecurity and shame. So relationships becomes a way to feel important, feel admired, feel validated. The connection isn't really about intimacy, it's about self-image. They think, how does this relationship reflect on me? So when they pull away, it's often strategic, to regain power, to create longing, to reassert control. For example, they're warm when you are impressed by them, and cold when you express your needs. Avoidant partners usually learned early that closeness felt unsafe. Maybe their feelings were ignored, maybe emotions weren't welcomed, maybe dependence was the only way to feel secure. So their nervous system learned, I'm safer relying on myself. When intimacy deepens, their body feels threat, not comfort. Their heart rate rises, their stress hormones spike. They feel emotionally flooded, so they pull back to calm themselves, not to control you, but to regulate fear. So how they handle your feelings? This is one of the clearest and most emotionally impactful differences. Let's talk about emotional engagement. Narcissistic emotional style. Many people think narcissists lack emotional intelligence, but that's not actually true. In fact, many narcissistic individuals are very emotionally perceptive. They can read moods, sense vulnerabilities, anticipate reactions, but empathy is conditional. They respond emotionally only when it supports their self-image. So if your feelings make them look good, they engage. If they challenge them, they dismiss. This is why you often feel emotionally understood at first and emotionally invisible later. For example, you say, I feel hurt when you disappear for days. They respond with, you are too needy. You are making this a big deal. You are overreacting. So over time, you stop trusting your own emotional experience. You start thinking, maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I expect too much. Maybe this is my fault. That's not emotional distance. That's emotional distortion. On the other hand, avoidance partners are usually very different. They often do feel empathy. They often do care. But emotional intensity overwhelms their nervous system. So instead of dismissing your feelings, they retreat from them. For example, you say, I feel lonely when you pull away. They respond with silence, changing the subject, saying, I need space. Not because they don't care, but because your emotions activate fear. They don't know how to stay present without feeling overwhelmed. So they disconnect to survive emotionally. At its core, narcissists erase your emotional reality. Avoidance escape from emotional intensity. And narcissists make you question your feelings. Avoidance make you feel alone with your feelings. Next, let's talk about accountability and change. For narcissistic patterns, accountability feels like a threat to identity. To admit fault feels like I'm flawed, I'm weak, I'm unworthy. So instead of reflection, you see blame shifting, gaslighting, victim positioning, justification. Even when they apologize, it often sounds like, I'm sorry you felt that way. If you hadn't done X, I wouldn't have done Y and Z. These aren't real repairs. They are ego-preserving statements. And this creates something very damaging. You start doing emotional labor for both of you. You explain, you soften, you take responsibility for their reactions. That's how relationship turns into self-abandonment. Avoidant partners struggle with accountability too, but for a completely different reason. Not because they feel superior, but because they feel emotionally exposed. They don't lack conscious, they lack emotional regulation skills. So they may need time to process. They avoid confrontation, and they withdraw before they can repair. But when safety is present, many avoidants say this: I know I shut down. I don't want to keep hurting you. I don't know how to do this, but I want to learn. That's not narcissism. That's emotional immaturity with growth potential. So here's what you need to remember. Narcissists protect their identity from shame. Avoidants protect themselves from emotional overwhelm. Narcissists resist reflection. Avoidants resist exposure. Now let's look at their overall patterns. Narcissist relational patterns like this. Number 1, idealization. You feel special, chosen, seen. Number 2, devaluation. Criticism, distance, emotional withdrawal. Number 3, control, hot and cold behavior, gaslighting, uncertainty. And number 4, dependency. You start chasing the versions of them from the beginning, and over time, you experience loss of confidence, anxiety, self-doubt, identity erosion. You don't just feel unloved, you feel lost. Let's look at the avoidant pattern. The cycle looks different. First is a connection. There is warmth, interest, and a slow emotional opening. Then there's emotional escalation, more closeness, more vulnerability, nervous system overload. They feel crowded, anxious, overwhelmed. Here comes withdrawal. There's silence, distance, space. And the last stage is return. Affection comes back after regulation. Over time, you experience loneliness, confusion, unmet emotional needs. But you usually still know who you are. You're not erased, you're just waiting. Overall, narcissists create trauma bonds. Avoidance creates emotional waiting rooms. Narcissistic relationships damage self-trust. Avoidance relationships strain emotional needs. If a relationship makes you doubt your reality, it's likely you are in a narcissistic dynamic. If a relationship makes you suppress your needs, you are probably in an avoidant dynamic. But if relationships make you abandon yourself, then the label no longer matters. So what do you do with all the information? If you are with someone avoidant behavior is not a character flaw. It's emotional skill gap. Do they have capacity for reflection? Not perfection, not instant change, but capacity. Can they say, I don't know why I shut down, but I want to understand it. Or, this is hard for me, but I don't want to keep hurting you. Because an avoidant person who is self-aware, open to therapy or coaching, willing to learn emotional language, can actually grow. But avoidant person who denies impact, refuses reflection, blames every partner creates the same emotional damage as the narcissistic patterns. Different psychology, same outcome. So with avoidant partners, the question isn't, are they avoidant? It's, are they willing to grow? Now, if you're with someone narcissistic patterns do not change through more explaining, more loving, more patience, more self-sacrificing. In fact, trying harder often deepens the dynamic because insight doesn't lead growth when the core issue is identity protection. So the healthiest response is not fixing, it's boundaries, and sometimes distance. Not as punishment, but as protection. Because narcissistic dynamic doesn't just hurt you. They slowly dismantle your sense of reality. And here's the truth. Both situations point to your healing should never depend on someone else becoming emotionally available. Whether someone is avoidant or narcissistic, the moment a relationship requires you to abandon your needs, manage your emotions, or shrink yourself to stay connected, you are no longer in intimacy. You are in survival. So the real question isn't, are they avoidant or narcissistic? Is this relationship asking me to become less of myself? Because avoidance asks for emotional education, narcissism asks for emotional boundaries. But both require the same thing from you: self-connection, self-trust, and the courage to stop negotiating your worth. And here is the hopeful part. When you stop trying to decode them and start listening to yourself, clarity comes naturally. Not from labels, not from diagnoses, but from how you feel when you're in a connection. Because healthy love doesn't require you to shrink, chase, or disappear. It supports your nervous system. It honors your emotional reality. And it allows you to show up as your full self, not a smaller version. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need it too. I'm Eve. This is Love Forward. I'll see you in the next episode.